A lot to talk about with my friend and brother, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management, Zach Abraham. We know about the shooting on Friday of the United Healthcare CEO. He and I are recording in advance, but I had something pop into my mind the second I saw this. And it has to do with the only thing that's ever really concerned Zach when he did an analysis on a company that got him to feel a little bit nervous. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about this comeback of sanity within companies like Walmart, who are dumping the Human Rights Campaign, which is this horrible group of two known who've helped trans kids across the country. And then a manufacturing survey shows some optimism. And we'll talk to Zach about the economy. I mean, that's something he knows far better than any of us here. We'll do this with the help of our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TheToddHermanShow, and of course, through the good grace of God Almighty.
The Todd Herman Show is 100% disapproved by big pharma, technocrats, and tyrants everywhere. No. From the high mountains of free America, here's the Emerald City exile, Todd Herman.
Today is the day the Lord has made, and these are the times through which God has decided we shall live. And you probably saw it, I saw it, the world saw it, the assassination, it appears, of the United Healthcare CEO on the streets of New York. And I instantly wanted to talk to someone who's not an expert on assassinations, but on corporate greed. And this seemed very, very eerily similar to me to something that happened with another company. Let's welcome to the show, Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. Zach, welcome in.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking about this thing that happened on a Wednesday in New York. You watched the video and I watched the video. Neither of us are experts on how shootings like this go down, but I want to get to some things I was reading in some military blogs and some gun blogs, but you looked at this. What'd you see?
Well, I mean, at first glance, it looked like a kid, that hopped off his bike after school, with the backpack on, everything like that. And I'll tell you what, then he whips out the gun. First thing I noticed was a suppressor on the end of it, which is not what a kid hopping off his bike at the end of school is going to do.
Right.
You've got some other analysis that you'll walk through that I think adds to that perspective. And then just the very calm, calculated, cool way that he operated. Again, I'm not an expert in, secret agents or clandestine operations, but I would be surprised if that guy had never done something like that before.
Yeah.
Right. It was eerily cool. It almost looked like he was sneaking up behind his buddy, shooting him with a paint gun.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's the part I noticed. This, like he shoots the CEO. The first time the CEO, stumbles up against a wall and then goes down, and the shooter continues to calmly walk forward. And he's got his eyes on the prize the whole time. This is as Brian Thompson, and the shooter's got his eyes on the prize. He steps forward, more shots, and you see him at one point look at the guy. And it looked like he's saying, okay, do I need a safety shot, or is this guy gone? Is he dead? I mean, that was a thorough job. There was something about the gun. I didn't notice this, but there's some military blogs and gun blogs I follow. Noticed that he was using some rounds that they contend are subsonic. Therefore, and they're noticing that because it didn't have enough power to cycle the gun automatically, to bring the slide back automatically. So he had to hand cycle the gun. And a couple of different guys wrote in and said, sure, to be less noticeable, to have less sound come off the rounds.
Yeah, and what was consistent about it too is the way that he was hand cycling it, like the consistency of it and the quickness of it. From meaning, if it wasn't a subsonic round and if you just had some bad ammo or whatever and it was getting hung up, it's harder to dislodge than that in that case, right? Where a subsonic round just doesn't cycle it fully, so you don't get hung up, right? Like you don't get one, where you get one bullet halfway in, and one bullet halfway out, and you got to do. And subsonic rounds just don't kick the hammer back far enough or the slide back far enough to grab the next bullet. So you just have to hand cycle it, right?
Yeah.
So that made perfect sense when you said it, which added to what I was saying, which was at first glance, kid looks like a kid that jumped off a bike. Then second glance, you watch the cool way he operates, the fact that there's a suppressor on the end of it, and then the fact that he's using subsonic ammunition. Right? It's sounding less and less like a teenage kid hopping off a bike.
Right. And he didn't look surprised that the gun wasn't auto cycling. It was like, okay, so whatever.
No.
I just, hand cycle. And again, you and I don't know. And again, we're recording this in advance. So it might have come out that, hey, maybe it's just an amateur that got lucky. I hate to say this. As watching this, I saw his wife said that he'd received some threats, maybe lack of coverage. And then she'd said, look, I'm trying to comfort my kids right now. I don't have time to be really thoughtful on this. I want to pray for her and her family. I hope this guy knew the Lord. But Zach, I got to tell you, immediately I saw people saying this is unprecedented. This hasn't happened since World War II, a corporate executive being, and I go, wait a minute, not a corporate executive, but I'm sorry. I still do not believe the story on the 2 Boeing whistleblower deaths. The one who he was just getting ready to receive a payoff for being a whistleblower, and the other guy with this sudden dying of this infection. And I just thought of you on this. I mean, did you think back to Boeing when you saw this hit?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I mean, I think that you're kind of at a place in society, unfortunately, where I think it's more likely for a CEO of one of these companies to get taken out than it would be, somebody like me. I will say this though, that when you saw the news come out about the whistleblowers from Boeing, I hate to jump to conclusions. People know my thoughts on Boeing. Accusing Boeing of the things that I did versus accusing them of purposely taking out witnesses are 2 different things. But I will not lie to you. When I saw the news about the Boeing whistleblowers get taken out, I mean, that sent chills through my body, because you just went, holy, hopefully there's a rational explanation for this. Again, you feel horrible for the family of the people that are lost, but, and then there's some other ones that you may know too, and I don't want to speak out of turn, Todd, but weren't there a couple folks that were whistleblowers against some of the big pharma companies that got taken out?
Yeah, yep. And that stuff never gets the focus it deserves. But here's the focus for me, Zach. And Zach Abraham's with us, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. KnowYourRiskRadio.com is where you can find him. We usually talk finance. This is related to finance, so Zach, is that United Healthcare and big companies, I see an observable lack of morality. And then with Boeing, like what you uncovered, Zach, when you guys were just simply analyzing stock, that you had employees coming out and saying, yeah, these airplanes might crash because, man, are they cutting significant corners? That's lack of morality. They're putting lipstick on the pigs of their facilities where they're not keeping the facilities up. And those should be kind of kept up. That when you see an utter lack of morality, DEI, the pushing of all the perverse agendas on kids coming out of corporate boardrooms, why would we not think that eventually it ends up with, hey, we should take this guy out, right? I mean, where nothing is forbidden, all is allowed.
Well, I mean, look, there's this veneer I think that we all have, right? And it's a veneer that you can see evident every time one of us steps on a plane. There is this societal contract that the vast majority of us adhere to. And we assume that everybody else is adhering to that societal contract as well. What you will be shocked by, and what I think we see evidence of every single day on the news, is an increasing percentage of people are not adhering to that societal contract, right? And the guys at Boeing are a perfect example of that, where us as rational people go, why would you ever kill the golden goose? Because these people are morally bankrupt. Okay, and one of the reasons they're morally bankrupt is it's a reflection of culture. You also pull God and morality out of schools and the education system. And then, oh, shocker, you get these people who are sociopaths at the top. Well, of course you do, right? Because you haven't emphasized or mandated morality or character or, any of these things, civic responsibility. None of this has mattered culturally. What are we telling kids? Do whatever feels right. Well, guess what? Making my bonus at the end of the year and getting $5 million worth of stock awards, that feels right to me. Right. So I'm going to do it.
Right.
And here you go. And we see it like in every segment of the culture where you go, look, man, I mean, you can say whatever you want. You can be agnostic. You can be an atheist. You can do whatever you want. I will just tell you, history is replete with stories when we pull out the genesis or the the seeds of morality out of a culture, there's never been a scenario in which you had a good outcome, and you just rotted from the head down. I
Right.
mean, it's just
Right. And if you take this, like, we're talking about Boeing, we're talking about United Healthcare, some of these big companies, I don't want to indict everybody because there's some big companies that have got their heads together and their souls together with good leadership. That does happen. But when morality is simply whatever you need to signal to be on the right side of demographics, on the right side of con artists like the Human Rights Campaign that's pushed the transing chemical surgical mutilation of kids, and they had their human rights index. Whatever you need to be on the right side of that is the morality you communicate. This comes down to like a huge Boeing customer, Alaska Airlines. Used to be my airline of choice. I used to love getting on Alaska Airlines because they would give you, your meal tray would come out and it would have a quote from the Bible on it. Right there, little prayer from the Bible, something from the Bible. I thought that was always really cool. And then one day that was gone. And the next thing I know is their flight attendants are wearing pronouns. And then there's a pride plane. Oh, what's this? Oh, it's the new thing. This is the new thing. This is the new morality we need to display. We may not believe it, but it doesn't matter. We need to display this.
It's like moral camouflage.
That's a great way to say it. Moral camouflage. We are pretending to have morals, even in that case, morals that stand adverse to the Word of God. So again, I go back to, like, we don't know at this point, and again, you and I are recording in advance on this stuff, but I looked at this, I saw Alex Berenson say, this is probably someone who was denied coverage. No, I don't think so. I think this guy, Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, I'm going to guess he might have been about to say something that might have cost someone a whole lot of money or maybe some jail time, such as, yeah, we've come out and found out these shots are very, very bad. Right? And
I hope that's not the case, but boy, it sure is. Yeah, I hear you.
I know. And there'd be a lot of wisdom in getting ahead of that. And people should get ahead of that using wisdom. I ran into a product that is named Wisdom. And this was a very cool thing that happened. I use this product. It's biblical herbs in an oil base. And it helps your body have a great response to inflammation, because inflammation can be your friend if it responds well. It helps with mental clarity and focus. And this was created by a doctor who'd been touring the Holy Land, walking where Jesus walked. His name is Dr. Patrick Tempo. So he decided to develop this product called Wisdom. I take this orally, which is how you take it, and it actually tastes delicious. My daughter, who's 20, puts it in her coffee. She still gets the lift from coffee, but she doesn't get the edge, the edginess. I've had the same experience. It's, for me, an overall feeling of calm, great taste. Some of those advanced manufacturing procedures in the world done in small batches to maintain potency and quality. So go try it for yourself. Go right now to trywisdom.com/Todd. That's trywisdom.com/Todd. You can stock up on Wisdom for an incredible 33% off, plus free shipping. Each order comes with a 180-day money-back guarantee. That's trywisdom.com/Todd. So Zach Abraham's with us, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. As we're watching this, Zach, and we're continuing to see the news unpeel, we can go back and look at this as we learn more about it. But I wanted to ask you about, we started to talk about DEI and woke, et cetera. There was an article that ran in CNBC. And here's the way they cast this thing. The war on woke, how a gay rights index, once touted by Walmart and others, became a conservative target. Because it was just sitting out there, then conservatives decided to target it. It was bothering nobody. We've seen the Trump dance in the NFL. We've seen it in the NBA. We've seen entertainers do this. We see, now younger and younger entertainers coming out and saying they're pro-Trump. We've seen the Silicon Valley people standing up. We should probably talk about Joe Rogan and this contention that Mark Andreessen has, that the government said there's only going to be 3 AI companies, period. We're going to block everybody else. But is this real? Are we seeing a true turning in corporate America where woke is finally getting punished out of the boardrooms?
Yeah, I think you are. My hope is that it lasts. I think it will. And the reason I think it will is because I think it had already failed, but I think that the election was sort of pulling back the cover and realizing that it had died, right? Yeah. Like meaning I think my contention is, if you had the election today, I think Trump's margin of victory would be probably double what it was
today.
And yeah. And the reason I say that is I think you have a ton of people who, and I feel like you see it in evidence of more and more people waves of people have come out and said, they're supporting Trump that didn't say prior to the election. Some of that is going to be disingenuous, right, to align themselves. But I think a lot of that is just people saying what they thought that they were afraid to say. And I think that interview with Mark Andreessen on Joe Rogan was really informative. And Mark's a really smart guy who was extraordinarily candid, in my opinion, in that interview. Confessed to precisely how he got where he got politically and mentally, and also what woke him up and what took him, what led him astray politically and what brought him back.
Yeah.
And I thought he outlined it perfectly. And I think he sums up a lot of people in the world who, sort of went along with the current of things, especially if that current of things ended up with them being very successful and very rich, because like you and I have discussed before, it's a natural human response to think that any system or body that puts them atop and grants them wealth and power, by default must be a just system, right? If it's picking me to be a winner, it must be a good, just system. And I think a lot of people got lulled into just kind of like Andreessen outlines in that interview, how when he went out to California and he made that move out to California, how he assumed that the people out in California knew better. They were smarter. They were more educated than his Wisconsin background. And I think that there's a big pushback. I think it's real. I also think that we shouldn't think that these people are on our side anymore. They've just realized that form of moral camouflage is no longer working, and they'll look for their next They'll look for their next source of moral camouflage. But there have been the guys like Andreessen who I think have said, okay, here we go. The game has changed. And the other thing, remember what he was talking about is something, again, that you and I have talked about, which I've been talking about this for years, which is regulatory capture, right? He was saying that the government and you and I have had this conversation. I'm like, look, the government wants those 3 companies or those 4 companies to dominate that industry because they can make nice with them and play with, and keep that, and it's in total violation of our constitutional rights. And government will have its reason to do that, but at the same time, they're treading where they shouldn't be.
I agree. I want to dig into these 3 companies in a second and the effect of this, but I want to make sure that I pay something off in terms of the CNBC thing, because you and I talking about Rogan and Andreessen, we're talking about 2. In the case of Joe Rogan, he'll probably be a billionaire one day if he's not one yet. But Mark Andreessen's multi-billionaire. 2 rich, powerful men, one in media. Mark Andreessen has a really now well-followed Substack and Twitter, but he's not a media guy. And they've awakened. Peter Thiel awakened. Other people awakened that, wow, the Democrats are tyrants, and they don't want us to have any meaningful debate about anything. And then I read this piece from Brandon Gomez at CNBC. And here's what he says about the Human Rights Campaign and their Human Rights Index. The benchmark is widely considered a gold standard for evaluating companies' policies and benefits for LGBT, so-called T, Q+ employees, and ratings were once touted by some of these same companies. It was widely considered the gold standard. See, in the world of a Brandon Gomez, widely considered means all my friends.
Right.
All my friends say this is the gold standard. So I guess my point is, Zach, that you see Rogan, Andreessen, others awakening to this, to the con of transgenderism, etc. But the media stays locked, just so inbred. That's the piece I'm going to be curious to see. Does revenue change this? CNBC is not doing well in revenue. MSNBC is destroyed in revenue. CNN is destroyed in their subscriber base and viewership base. What brings them around?
I don't think anything. And I think they're just, I think that what you saw in the election is the final death knell in their forms of having any real meaningful impact on the public discourse. I just think they're done. I think they're irrelevant, because even if they pivot back toward the middle, right? Even if they try to be a hard news organization, they're going to lose the only listening base they've got, because their listening base doesn't want to hear the truth, right? They don't want to hear. If you want to believe that January 6th was an insurrection and that Donald Trump is the greatest threat to democracy going, okay, you don't want to hear the truth. You just don't.
Yeah.
Okay, now, and that doesn't mean Donald Trump's perfect, right? It just you are pushing a false narrative, and if that's what you want to believe, then the minute I pivot back and dedicate myself toward, delivering you real content, I'm going to alienate you too. So I mean, but by them doing what they should have done years ago, it's game over. I mean, right? This is just a point of. I mean, at this point, it's like the rat's off the Titanic, in my opinion. I mean, their constituency is dying, their customer base is leaving. They've shot themselves in the foot, and we guys like us were saying it years ago, and arrogance is a heck of a drug, man.
It is, ignorance and arrogance. And I want to get back into the AI discussion, because there was a note. A guy named David Marcus put this up on Twitter. He had been the head of payments at. He was at Meta. He was at Messenger. He led PayPal. You probably know who David Marcus is. He's at a company now called Lightspark, and it's the whole payment ecosystem. He talked about how his approach at Meta was destroyed by governments and how they slow rolled it and then destroyed it. And I want to talk about these 3 AI companies as it relates to people investing in AI. So think about that, where the government said there's going to be 3 companies and they ruined this company. So we'll talk about this with Zach Abraham, Chief Investment Officer, Bulwark Capital Management. And while we're talking about Zach, let me tell you a little bit about why I choose to have Zach manage our money. First of all, is because I've gotten to know him long, and it was, probably 2 years before we put our money over with Zach, when I got to know him as a man. First heard about him through a common friend who's passed on, gone to the Lord, Dory Monson. He said, you got to meet Zach. Went to a dinner at a charitable event with he and his wife. Came away from it saying, these are good people. They're down-to-earth people. He's a fiduciary who doesn't talk like one. He's a guy who talks in a plain way about finance, but super educated. Then I got the personal story about he and his wife experiencing financial hardship and loss. And dang it, that's so rare and it's so important. Then we talked risk management. That's the focus at Bulwark Capital Management, risk management, which he does through actively managing every portfolio, which can, in fact, reduce risk and volatility. Then when I saw him interact with viewers and listeners to this show, in person, being the last person to leave a room, we gave a speech. Zach came and gave a speech with me in Seattle, and we had, 3,000 or 4,000 people at this thing. And Zach stayed, and he and I were the last persons to leave. Security was trying to finally kick us out. Poor guys, they got families. And there's Zach, to the last person answering questions. This is my guy. So do this. Have him take a look at your retirement portfolio. Really simple, no obligation, no promises. If you like what he says and you think that he makes more sense, then move your money over. So go to knowyourriskradio.com. That's KNOW, knowyourriskradio.com, or just call directly 866-779-RISK.
Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. Any references to performance of securities are thought to be materially accurate, and actual performance may differ. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance doesn't guarantee future results. Trek 24308.
So, Zach, Mark Andreessen said a lot of things on Rogan's show. One of them that he talked about was the Biden people wanting to install a pure China model where they monitor everything we do, control everything we say. Then he talked about AI, and that's what he said. He said there's going to be 3 companies that the government told him, hey, don't even bother investing. Don't even do that. We're not going to allow more than 3 companies to exist. So what does that mean for people who are, let's say, retail investors who are going out and doing this on their own? Is there any point in spreading the bets, or you just try to figure out what the 3 companies are?
Yeah, no, well, we know what the 3 companies are. Okay. And truth be told, it's probably really 4, but I think the 3 main players are going to be Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. Those are going to be the primary 3. Meta's in there a little bit. Apple to a degree as well. But I mean,
what about like the Chat GPTs of the world? I mean, are they going to force them to get purchased?
Well, remember, Microsoft already owns a big chunk of that, right?
Okay.
In a very complicated ownership structure. But this is an extension of what we've been talking about, which is the end of free market capitalism via regulation. And this is what we were saying, which is, it's why it's so ironic that the trope that's constantly thrown at Trump is that he's a fascist, right?
Right.
What you are watching is a furthering creep of fascistic tendencies, right? Which is, hey, we're going to have privately held businesses, but they're going to be under the control of the government, right? And when people are like, well, that's what they, no. Being regulated by a government and being controlled by them are two completely different things. When the government is involved in a sector, picking winners or losers and saying who is going to control a transformational new, that is not a free market. That is a usurping of a free market, right? That is total interference and short circuiting of a free market. And this is what they've been doing. And they've been covering it up with greater regulation, greater security. You're going to hear people say, we have to let these companies continue to grow because China is funding tech companies. And you're like, no, look, I've heard this all before. Okay. I don't care that the government is funding them in China, right? The government is a horrible allocator of capital. Okay. That has never stopped us before. That didn't prevent us from beating the Russians, and it won't prevent us from beating the Chinese. Okay. Why America works is the very thing that you are retarding, the very thing that you're holding back. You're saying that the free market doesn't know well enough to do with this. Oh, yes, it does, right? You're the ones that have proven over and over that you don't know what to do with it. So no, it's just this regulatory capture game going on. The tech companies are wise to it, and they've gotten themselves to the size. This is this problem with this regulatory capture thing. They've gotten themselves to a size where when the government's not irrational for coming to that conclusion, right? If your job was really to control and shape and move AI, that's the easiest way to do it, right? Is by working in concert with those 3 or 4 companies. The problem is that it violates the tenets on what we were built on, right? And what we were constitutionally guaranteed. So that's the issue.
So does this mean, and I agree with you on all the regulatory capture, I agree with you maybe on the big 4 players, big 3 to 4 players. Does this mean that you guys are not going to be looking at investments for, let's say, AI startups, or is it going to be that the startups are capped? Because I remember back in the day, you'd reach a point where you could see a startup grow to, let's say, they'd allow them to reach about 200 million, 250 million, maybe 500 million in value before they had to get purchased. Microsoft used to have a formula for this. So their acquisitions departments, they had a formula for when you go acquire a company. It had to do with share of markets, revenues, et cetera. So is this going to be a thing where there's all these little AI companies who sprout up, but they know that they're really only ever going to get to be a $200 or $250 million company, and that's the bet? They're never going to be able to grow into a $1 trillion thing?
Well, so now, I mean, thank goodness the election went the way it did, because I think all those bets are off now, right? And my hope and my firm belief is that the Trump administration is going to take a decidedly different turn.
You think they're going to? Okay, so you think they're going to stop this?
No, I think that I don't think that they will pursue the same tactics and the same approach that the Biden administration did. I just would be absolutely shocked, especially when you look at who's involved there. Guys like Musk, who know that, listen, if we want to win, we can even set aside the constitutionality part of it, right? But if we want to win the AI race, we've proven over and over and over that innovation is no, in the history of mankind, has not been as efficient, fast, or violent as it is in the U.S. system when government just gets out of the way. Now, have there been times where government has intervened and there have been partnerships? Yes. I'm not saying that those haven't occurred, but in a situation like this, where the baseline technology has already been released and is already out there, right? How to best develop it, how to win. Let's do it the way we did everything else, right? Which is just get out of the way. Trump knows that. Musk knows that intimately. I have to believe they're going to pursue another approach. I also don't think that either of them think it is a good idea for those tech companies to grow into perpetuity and just keep swallowing swaths of the economy. And to comment something further on what you've said, I think this is a perfect example of where we're at, right? You were talking about your Microsoft days and that number, that buyout number being around 250, that buyout number is down to like 25 to 50 million now.
Is it really?
Right, in revenue. Yeah, for whatever reason. In the VC world, part of it's the proliferation of VC funds, meaning the big companies know that they got to act sooner because the VC funds are out there hoovering them up.
Yeah.
But that's the approach. The approach anymore with most of these big companies now, it's not buy that because we can plug it into our ecosystem. We think it's going to be great. it's by that, if we find a use for it, fantastic, but at the very least, we won't have to compete against it.
Gosh, it's just to negate it. It's just to park it. I didn't believe it when we sold our company, which had super early. It wasn't AI, but it was big data. And we'd done a lot of, I think, unique licensing deals where we took different products and combined them into one. And WPP purchased us, the world's largest PR firm. And so we went to work there with all these earnouts, and we're looking at the earnouts as big money. And I realized they're killing this. I watched technology people, and I sat in a meeting with a person who said, is this better tech than what we have? Yes. Did I think it was smoke and mirrors when I walked into the room? Yes. Do I think that now? Nope. I can see that this is very real and very scary and very potent. It's just that it's this. I don't think that we're prepared to take advantage of it from a billable hours rate. So next thing I know, like, wait a minute, we're not getting invited to RFP discussions, to presentations anymore. And it occurred to me, they couldn't figure out how to get themselves out of the billable hour thing to let our tech do what people were getting paid, $100 an hour. Our tech would do for $0 an hour once they amortized it and got it all out of the way. So that's where we're at now, is just isolate these companies. I want to tell a workout story in a second, because you want to talk about innovation. In fact, as I do this, Alex is going to play a video of something called a reverse hyper. And you won't see this, Zach, but the viewers will. I'll send this to you later, because we're talking about innovation. Zach just mentioned this. So my friends at Bioptimizers are innovators, and they innovated their way as bodybuilders, in the case of Wade, into being a world champ bodybuilder as these two things, vegetarian and all natural. So now he had to work out and had to compete in the all-natural world, because, you can't compete with a steroided body. But as a vegetarian, he won world championships. But man, did he punish his body. And so did his buddy Wade, who is his co-founder at Bioptimizers. They created this lab that was for elite athletes, to help elite athletes overcome what they do to their bodies as elite athletes, because there is a cost to be paid. And when that became successful, they started to notice they had some products that would work for everybody. One of them is Magnesium Breakthrough. And you've heard me talk about this from a perspective of sleep. But let me focus on something about this season. Christmas time, Hanukkah, the holidays are super stressful for a lot of people. You have people come over to your house, maybe people you love. Some people maybe you don't want to be in the house. You got the timing of buying gifts, and are they going to be delivered? Are we going to make the airplane flight? Money becomes an issue. So here's a way to use Magnesium Breakthrough during this holiday season to not let yourself be robbed of joy. It helps deliver calm. It controls the stress hormone cortisol. It encourages and enables the optimal absorption of nutrition, which can give you more energy at the same time as creating calmness. So do this. Choose calm this holiday season. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. Use code Todd to get an extra 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. That's bioptimizers.com/Todd. Zach, you're going to kick out of this. You know about the company called Westside Barbell. Have you ever seen these guys? Okay, so you've seen the videos. It was founded by this guy named Louis Simmons, insane power lifter who was still squatting 600, 700 pounds in his 60s. He broke his back. So dude breaks his back, and he's an older guy, and surgeons say, you're done. You might not walk again. Your back's broken. You never lift again. So he goes home, and he invents this device, which Alex is showing you on video, called a reverse hyper. And you see someone using this reverse hyper. I'm saying this because I just bought one of these. He used that, and he was able to squat and work out again. This is a guy who he's not a designer. He's not a surgeon. He's not a PhD. He is a roughneck weightlifter. That's innovation. He had this thing patented for like 10 years, 15 years. You couldn't buy one for under $5,000. And then people figure out how to reverse engineer it. Now you can buy, actually one of his Westside Hypers is $395. That's the version I got off of Facebook Marketplace. That's the point, Zach, about this innovation. That Americans left to their own ends will innovate, and that's what's being blocked. And you think that the Trump administration, with their attitude at least, is going to enable innovation to come back?
When you think about Doge, I think people think about the money saving.
Yep.
Look, that's not the point of Doge. Doge is not going to save us money and get our budget balanced, right? The main advantage of Doge is going to be economic productivity and getting out of the way of entrepreneurs and innovators. And like we've told you, man, or like you and I have talked about, this is not, this isn't political or economic dogma, right? This is cyclicality, meaning there have been times in our country's history where we needed more regulation. A perfect example of that was the beginning of the 20th century, right? Teddy Roosevelt, antitrust laws, all that kind of stuff. There have been times in the past, like the beginning of the 80s, at the end of the Carter administration, where we needed less regulation. Today is one of those times where regulations have really been creeping in a very not unsubtle, but scary or shockingly consistent way since 08, 09, and you've gone too far. And I can give you example after example after example. I can give you example of regulatory, in my opinion, which is regulatory harassment. Just if you've had to go up against one of these institutions or departments, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it probably sounds like a bunch of wealthy business people crying. And I'm just telling you, people don't realize the kind of back alley muggings that are occurring with these regulatory bodies. And it's happened to me. It's happened to me. Yeah. And it is really unnerving, and it is one of the most odd, alienating feelings I have ever had, where you completely guiltlessly are being persecuted by a federal government with bottomless pockets, and you've got no recourse, right? Even when you prove they're wrong, you've got no recourse. And this is blocking tremendous amounts of innovation. It's blocking tremendous amounts of capital formation. And it doesn't bother the big guys. You're not going to hear it on CNBC because all they're focused on is the big companies that are funding people's election campaigns, right?
Right.
But then you flip around and you realize that small business still employs 60% of the people in this country. And you have completely, and I'm talking through both Obama administrations, you completely, almost everything you passed, wittingly or unwittingly, was a benefit to giant corporations at the cost of small business. And you got to undo some of that, man, because your economy and your labor force, it is intricately tied to small business. That's where innovation comes from. It's just, they talk about eating your corn seed or your seed corn, right? That's what you've been doing. And it,
Yep.
They got to reverse it. I think they will. And if they don't, there's going to be a lot of unpleasant economic realities we have to face, because that Microsoft ain't our engine of innovation. Nope. The U.S. consumer and the U.S. dreamer and entrepreneur is.
Right. Microsoft is one of our engines of entropy. And I hate to say it, but Google's becoming the same way. Apple's becoming the same way. And we've got this consistent cash flow, as you've taught us about on the show, Zach, people buying their stock automatically through electronic trading platforms. And it happens every month, and they don't need to care. They don't need to innovate. I'll share. I know a little bit about what you went through with regulators, and maybe one day we'll talk about that. Completely unfair, absolutely terrifying, because as you said, they don't have to care. They have all the money they need. It's not their skin. It's not their risk. They go home at 5 o'clock and they don't care. They don't care what it does to you. I have a small example of this you can relate to as a homeowner. I'll share with this to you in a second. In this season, coming up, it's Christmas time. We've been talking about Bone Frog cellars. So what do we have coming? We have Christmas. We have New Year's. That's a big time for people who love to get just stone cold drunk. That's the stuff Tim Cruikshank, the founder and CEO of Bone Frog Cellars, wants me to talk about. He's a retired Navy SEAL. He was a medic with the teams, physician's assistant. He wanted me to talk about getting stone cold, passing out, vomiting, drunk. What? Oh, sorry. No, wait, that's a different product. No, Tim is about the responsible use of adult beverages, wines, and he has worked with a family who's been in this business for decades. He wanted to make wine. He didn't know how. He did the same thing with coffee. In coffee, he got Dave Stewart to mentor him to make some of his roasts for Bone Frog Coffee. So Tim traveled around Washington State and went into the tri-state areas, Washington, Idaho, Oregon area, found a family who knows what they're doing. Loved the fact that Tim, a SEAL, wanted to create something for his family to last, to be a legacy, but also to support the memory of fallen SEALs. That's what the Bone Frog means. Every bottle is really classic black and white. It's got the bone frog image. That's the image of a fallen Navy SEAL. It says on the bottle, God Country Team. And every bottle says God Country Team on it. We had at our home a tasting party from just new drinkers of wine. They loved the Cabernets and the Merlots, the 2015 vintage. My wife, who drinks it a little more often, and then some friends of ours who I think is fair to say they're either wine snobs if you want to be snarky or experts at it if you want to be kind. And they are experts. So go to bonefrogsellers.com/Todd. Get 10% off the wines there, bonefrogsellers.com/Todd. Remember that 10% of proceeds always go to the Navy SEAL Foundation to help the families of fallen Navy SEALs. bonefrogsellers.com/Todd. You might be able to relate to this, Zach. It doesn't get up to the level of where you were at, but we were doing home improvement in our house in the Des Moines, Normandy Park area. I had a beautiful view, had these really classic Swiss-made ceilings. This guy was a high-level Boeing engineer. He designed the house, and he had these tongue and groove, and he was so proud of those. Not a nail up there, man. Everything fits perfectly. The finish is perfect. It was one of the outstanding things about our house. Everybody came to our house and go, wow, the ceilings, are you kidding? And they matched the wood floors to a T. Yeah, this guy was solid. So we're getting new windows. And we had 39 windows, and we had a guy come out, and this might have happened. It's a possibility that this occurred. So it's possible that when he came in and he gave us a bid, he said, okay, here's the windows you have to buy legally. And here's the drop ceiling you have to install legally. That is, unless you already have your permit. And I said, let me understand what you're saying. I have to buy white, ugly windows that will not match our brick house or our paint. And I have to go from a 20-foot ceiling to an 8.5, 9-foot ceiling that is going to be filled with styrofoam and sprayed with popcorn. Like the popcorn white spray. Yeah. I have to do that unless I already have a building permit. And he goes, that's right. I go, what the heck is this? He goes, it's called the Port Package. The Port of Seattle purchased all these windows, all these ceilings to abate airplane noise. I go, we're not affected by airplane noise. Like we see the airplanes coming in, but they're not loud. We actually like watching them. Well, that's the deal. Okay, I might have said to him, I have a building permit. Do you need to see it? And it's possible that he said, no, I trust you. I just need you to sign this thing that says that you have one. I said, okay. So he put them in. I go, what would happen if a building inspector happened to come by? He goes, if they had the windows all done and we were just finishing up, yep, they'd make us take them out. They'd make us remove them at your cost.
So you don't get to pick what kind of windows you wanted in your house?
No, because the Port of Seattle bought them in advance for each house.
So that you get them for free?
Oh, no. You still pay for them. You get a reduced rate. But yes, they forced this into these homes that have these unbelievable views of the sound.
But what if you like airplane noise? Wait, what do you mean you can't?
This is what he told us. And I saw it in other houses. I'd been in my neighbors' houses that they got windows replaced, and they had the popcorn ceiling from the 70s. Like, why is that there? Oh, that's the Port Package. And then I drove around the neighborhood and I saw, wait, yeah, that's a brown house that's got these white frames, and those don't match. And I realized that other people had given into this. So I actually said, this is possible that I said this. I may have emailed my wife and said, I can't believe this. I just got home from a business trip and someone installed new windows in our house. I don't know who to contact. I don't even know if this is okay, but I didn't sign off on this. And it's possible that my wife wrote back and said, yeah, it's so weird. I saw the same thing. All of a sudden, there's windows. But it's a
random act of kindness, man. What are you supposed to do?
He told me a story that they had done work, windows in an apartment building that was 12 stories tall downtown, and they were getting ready to get them finished. There's this formula where they leave some windows open until the last minute, like one on top, one in the middle, so that the airflow is okay, doesn't blow the windows out.
Right.
They're putting in some of the last windows. The building inspector is there. He says, no. Nope, these need to be set back. We had some rule. And so the guys go, okay, all right, we'll got it. We'll send it back. He goes, no, you don't get it. Start over. start over. Go remove all the windows. I will reinspect them. But wait, you already had this. These have already been inspected. Like, this is the finished job. Go start over.
Unbelievable.
Right. And that doesn't even begin to match what you have seen. So one question, earlier this week, the NASDAQ jumped up to this new record to start the S&P 500 indexing higher. People all excited about this. The more you've taught me about finance, the more I look at this and go, who cares?
Yeah.
None of it's rational. I don't care.
Yeah.
Should we even be spending any time looking at the S&P?
Look,
Yeah.
It's tough right now. And it's tough because I do think that we have got good economic things coming down the pipe. Okay. That being said, I think the vast majority of people are not paying attention to how crazily valued so many of the things in this market are. And like we've said, what makes it so difficult is there's things that aren't overvalued, and some of the things that are overvalued, there are it's tough. What concerns me here's what concerns me is that so many of the companies that so many people are invested in are completely detached from underlying fundamentals, meaning they're not detached from the reasons they're going up. And I think you cited it pretty clearly. The reasons that the vast majority of these companies are going up is because of wage gains. And people are like, what do you mean? Go, well, wage gains feed directly into 401k accounts. 401k accounts are almost exclusively now exchange traded funds, which means when you put money into your 401k account, that money is just getting thrown blindlessly into the market and buying all 500 stocks in the S&P 500. So what you are seeing now is you're seeing kind of a weird market composition that we've never really witnessed before, which is most or the good portion of some of your most crazy expensive companies are now at the top half of the market, where that was never the case, right? It was usually your biggest, most boring companies at the top of the market because they're the biggest, right? But now you see some of these companies toward the top of the market that have valuations that make them look like, penny stock growth companies.
Yep.
And
yep.
so
so bizarre.
Now, here's the crazy part. When I look at this market right now and I look what's going on, and you've got the NASDAQ making fresh new all-time highs today, S&P Dow making new all-time highs today at valuations that you've only seen two other times in U.S. history. Look, I think that you're setting up to where if you told me that a year from now the market was 50% higher than it currently is. Remember we were having this conversation a year ago when I was telling you, look at the sketchy things on the horizon, look at all this kind of stuff. But that being said, I wouldn't be horrifically shocked if in the next 12 to 24 months the market was double where it's currently at. Well, we're about halfway there now, right? I mean, you're about halfway there. So, when you get this expensive, is it really any different when you've got a company like Apple trading at 40 times earnings as opposed to 55?
Nope.
Why not? Right? Costco's at 60. Why not run it to 80? NVIDIA, I mean, you just go down the list. You're like, why not? There's no, you're not connected to underlying valuations right now. Apple's now hitting the highest mark it's been at ever, at the highest valuation it's been at in 25 years. And it's got its worst financial performance growth in that entire time, right? Which is, and that's what people need to understand. It's not just the price of the stock. It's Apple's growth is now at the lowest point it has been at since inception, since Jobs took back over in the late 90s. And you are now paying the most expensive price for the stock in terms of, per earnings, right? You're paying the highest valuation for the stock ever, and it's never grown at a slower pace. So, these aren't opinions of mine, right? These are just observations. So, but those dynamics that have driven the market higher are still in play. Not to mention that I think that you've got positive economic stuff coming down the pipe from the Trump administration. But what do you do here? I don't know. This effectively, in my opinion, a big part of this market is turned into a casino where you're making a bet. Does it go higher or not? But you're not investing,
Yeah.
right? When you're buying up these companies at 200, 250, 300 times earnings at 30, 40, 50 times revenue, that's not an investment. meaning the valuation of that company is so high that you are speculating and you just need to, right? Because you're hoping that the stock price goes up at that point. You're not sitting there looking at cash flows and margins going, okay, if I pay this price for the stock, I'll get an ROI in 4.5 years. And right, you're not doing that. That's investing. So I will just tell you, look, this period of time will end like every other period of time, like it ended, which is in disaster and collapse. I think well, it will, right? But I think we could be a long way, but we could be a long way away from that. And that's the tough part about it. And so when you get down to, well, what do? You manage risk. That's the only thing you can do in this market.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. Zach, thank you so much for always coming on with Wise Counsel. Say hello to the family. Thank you for staying the course. And one day we'll tell that story about the regulatory stuff. We're going to figure that out.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, with the BIPOCs, say hi. So.
All right. Thanks. Right back for the WIPOCs. This
All
is
right.
the Todd Everett Show. Please go be well, be strong, be kind. Please make every effort to walk in the light of Christ.